When I hear Warhammer, I mainly think of Space Marines, British Greenskins, and the meat shields that make up the Imperial Guard. That's due to most Warhammer things I've come across being based on Warhammer 40k, so when I saw that a Warhammer game not set in the 40k universe, or being some strange tic-tac-toe version of football headed to PC, needless to say, my interest was piqued. So let's dive in, shall we?
Let's see here. Ooh. Oh my.
Warhammer Quest is a game based on the Warhammer Quest board game by Gamesworkshop and was originally released in 2003 for iOS devices, and it was also developed by Rodeo Games. It's recently come to PC under the publisher Chilled Mouse and doesn't really seem to have changed all that much from its previous version. Your mouse replaces any and all touchscreen involvement from the previous version, and the game doesn't use the keyboard at all. No key bindings or anything. While that doesn't really seem to be a problem, since you can easily control everything with the mouse, considering that I'm on PC and that I have a keyboard, some sort of hotkeys would really have been nice to see. Everybody loves their hotkeys, it just makes things quicker and simpler to do. When it comes to the options menu, it's a bit lacking considering there aren't any quality options, but you do have some resolution options. That is, if you open the options screen from the main menu. If you're in-game, you actually do not have access to the resolution options for some reason. The reason why the game doesn't have quality options, I would guess, is that its graphics are pretty bare bones. I haven't had any issues when it comes to frame rate drops or lag, but then again, Warhammer Quest is a top-down roguelike dungeon crawler. Each dungeon is randomly stuck together 2D images with 3D character models placed on top of it. While the aesthetic does have it look more like the board game the game's based off of, I can't help but feel that the 2D images and the 3D images just don't really match together all that great. And the images used for the rooms are also very similar looking to each other, so it makes it hard to tell dungeons apart, and they all look and feel exactly the same. Warhammer Quest is also a bit of a slow game. Combat is all turn-based strategy where your team moves, then the enemy team moves, then you move, then they move, and so on and so forth, but it doesn't stop there. Dungeons are broken up into both combat and non-combat areas, but you still have to take turns even if you're in a non-combat area with no enemies around. Characters can only move so far per turn, and they can't move through each other or, of course, through walls. This can make trekking down empty hallways rather tedious before you actually reach the next room with the next batch of enemies to deal with. To help alleviate some of this, Quest does have random events or encounters that can happen each turn while you are or are not in combat. Some are helpful, some are not. That's just the way things go, and they're randomized as to what happens when, so you never know if you'll get something good or bad. Some of them actually do give you a couple of options of things to do, which is kinda cool. But while these can help break up the monotony of moving through an empty area in a dungeon, if anything, it just eats up more time before I'm able to make progress. What's even stranger is that while in combat, when the enemies are taking their turn, you can speed up the pace of the game, but you can't do that any other time in the game. Your party will always move and attack with the same slow animations, and there's nothing you can do to change it whether there are enemies around to fight or are not. This can really drag out the pace when it comes to clearing out dungeons, even if you're having an easy time tearing your way through the monsters that are in there. There's also a chance that every time you end a turn, more monsters will spawn for you to fight. This can happen while you're not in combat or while you're already in combat, spawning more monsters all over the place regardless of how many you're already fighting. Even with this, the combat is definitely the best part of the game, as it works really well once you're able to actually get to it. Each character in your party is a different class with their own abilities, and no two are alike. Some are good against some kinds of enemies, while others can't do much on their own and work better as support. The same goes for your enemies as well. You never know what you'll come across until you actually get to it, and enemies feel just as limited and powerful in what they can do as your team does, in my opinion. Just like with the rooms though, there isn't a huge variety of monsters to fight. You got your skeletons, your zombies, rats, bats, a few kinds of orcs, and that's about it. Oh, there's also spiders. Freaking spiders. But none of the enemies really feel all that special. The biggest thing that factors into fighting is accuracy. I have never seen so many missed attacks in my life. Hitting and getting hit doesn't happen anywhere near as often as you would think, and that's double when it comes to ranged weapons, but that is easily countered by the amount of damage done per hit. My party was able to easily one-shot many of the plentiful enemies, and while enemies usually wouldn't one-shot my party, outside of trolls of course, because they're huge, enemies can quickly gang up and take down one of my heroes if I'm not paying attention. Depending upon what difficulty you're playing on, losing a hero can be a big deal, or not so much of a big deal. On the easier difficulties, your heroes will come back at the end of a dungeon, but on the hardest difficulty, if they die, they are gone for good. The only thing that kind of limits the combat situations is how cramped the rooms in the dungeons can be at times, but since you only get a maximum of 4 party members you can take with you on a quest in a dungeon, I found the room size to be more strategic than annoying, considering I'm almost always outnumbered. When putting a party together at the start of a dungeon, there's a good amount of heroes to pick from. Or I should say there is if you buy the $30 Deluxe Edition. The biggest issue with Warhammer Quest is that it is filled with microtransactions, even though the base PC game is $15. Now, the original iOS version was $5 plus microtransactions, which is still a bit ridiculous, but way more reasonable than what's currently available on Steam. Purchasing the base game gets you 4 characters, 3 places to explore, and a couple of enemies to fight. Purchasing the Deluxe Edition gets you an extra 7 characters, more enemies to fight, as well as some special weapons. If you buy the base game, you can buy the characters and such individually, so you only pay for what you want. That is, if you know what you want before you actually buy it. I've been playing the Deluxe Edition, and while I've enjoyed the gameplay, I can't say that I can back this kind of pricing, especially for a game that you've already paid for. There's even an option to pay between $3 and $30 for in-game currency for a game that you have already paid for. While I've never really come across a time in the Deluxe Edition as to where I felt like I needed to buy in-game currency, there are a few things that I feel only exist to eat up your cash flow. When it comes to upgrading characters, not only do you need to gain enough experience points to level them up, but you also have to pay out a good chunk of in-game cash to do it. And the price you gotta pay out goes higher each time you level up a character. The worst part about Warhammer Quest's business model is that it has already turned people away from a pretty good game. I really like both the combat and quest systems and the fact that not only are the dungeons you explore randomized every time you enter them, but basic quests are randomized as well, so you don't always go for the exact same thing. And every time you pick a quest, it randomizes all of the other quests that you can do, so there's always something new to go after or someone new to save. It's also great that some of the main story quests give you different options of things to do. And the game's also pretty well written when it comes to the story. The only thing that is really missing from the game itself is some personality. You can't create or really customize your characters at all. You can't even name them. They are their classes, and that is about it. While I've found a few of them that I like to use all the time, as well as a few who don't seem to be all that useful, I can honestly say that I do not remember any of their names, but only their roles, such as the Elf Archer Lady or the Witch Hunter guy, and that is it. There's no voice acting outside of grunts and yells either, which makes it hard for me to care about my characters at all, since they don't really stand out as characters. The whole game is like that for the most part. Sound effects are dull, and enemies like rats and bats share the same ones. There's even times where the game glitches and won't play any sound effects at all. There's no real juice in the game to keep me super interested in what's going on, and because of that, I can say I've only put a few hours on the Warhammer Quest so far. Although I can say that the music in this game is fantastic. It's both eerie and heart-pounding with percussion and strings, and does a great job of setting the tones of combat situations, as well as exploring the unknown. It's really good. I really do like Warhammer Quest, and it does some great stuff with its combat and music, but it's convoluted with its slow pace, microtransaction-laden business model, and the awkward equip menu. I mean, why are there 3 areas to equip stuff to my characters? Why do common, uncommon, and rare items need their own separate slots? It's not like I can equip both a common and rare weapon at the exact same time. It just doesn't make much sense. But seriously, I do like what Warhammer Quest does with its gameplay, and if you can get past its business model, then there's some fun to be had. If you can't, then maybe wait for a sale. I've been Megapieman. Let me know what you think about the game or this video in the comment section, and I'll talk to you guys later. I really like how open the game is, since there's a reason to explore just about everything. Just about every nook and cranny has some purpose to exist, be it finding hidden items or people to talk to.